Good afternoon, folks. My name is Harris Hoyne. I am a historic interpreter with the Telfair Museums Association, though this afternoon I'll be speaking on behalf of myself out of the Hoyne Museum, better known as my office. This afternoon, we're going to be giving you a program on the impact of alcohol in the Civil War, and the entire program will be happening in the comfort of your own home as you listen to me. Normally, this program would take around 45 minutes. However, we're distilling it down to a simple 10-minute version. And all that we ask of you is that you get yourself a drink. I know I've got one here for myself. And of course, that if you need to use the restroom or take care of anything, feel free to do so before we begin. All right, with all of that taken care of, let's go ahead and get things started. Now, I know I like to start my programs with telling a story, and what better story to tell than the story of the people at the very top in the Civil War, helping to show the way that they treated alcohol. Following the Vicksburg campaign, detractors of General Grant, they cried out that he was a drunkard, that he was an alcoholic, that his taste for drink detracted from his ability to lead. And allegedly, President Lincoln thought over this for a moment before talking to the men calling for Grant's resignation. And he asked them, "Do any of you know what brand of whiskey General Grant drinks?" These men found themselves unsure of how to respond, and they couldn't give a good answer. So Lincoln followed his inquiry with a strong statement that made his point very clear. "When you find out, let me know, and I would have a barrel of it sent to each and every one of my generals." Throughout the 19th century, consumption of alcohol was very common. For the working class, alcohol served as a way to assuage their aches and their exhaustion, where for the high class socialites, it served as both an accent to their meals and as a social lubricant. Rather directly, an English traveler named Frederick Marriott described the American drinking culture very well. He said, "I'm sure that the Americans can fix nothing without a drink. If you meet, you drink. If you part, you drink. If you make an acquaintance, you drink. If you close a bargain, you drink. They quarrel in their drink, and they make up with drinks. They drink because it's hot. They drink because it's cold. They drink when they're successful in elections, and they rejoice. And if not, they drink and they swear." Well, this American drinking culture was only even further exacerbated by the stress and horror of war as the Civil War began in America. Between 1863 and 1865, the amount of alcohol consumption in the United States spiked from about 201,600 gallons to a staggering 624,000 gallons. The amount of labor necessary in order to be able to keep up with this demand is just astonishing. Early in the war, privately owned distilleries were enough to keep up with demand. But as the perceived necessity of consumable alcohol rose, action had to be taken. This gentleman right here, who I need to get his image, here we go. Surgeon General Samuel Preston Moore would be the one to spearhead these efforts to make sure that an adequate supply of liquor could be provided to his soldiers. And he pushed for reforms that would have distilleries put in state-run distilleries all throughout the Southeast, in Salisbury, North Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, and Macon, Georgia, places that may actually be fairly close to home for some of you. Now, can any of y'all give me a ballpark as to how many gallons you think were being produced in a day? Those are some good guesses. Under Moore's plan, we actually saw these state-run distilleries producing upwards of 200 to 500 gallons of liquor a day once they were under full production. But the next question is, where do you think all of this was going? Surely the soldiers weren't just drinking hundreds and hundreds of gallons of liquor a night, right? Well, in truth, it was a combination of personal consumption and it was used for medical purposes. Although the idea of using alcohol for antisepsis or disinfection wasn't confirmed until 1867 by Dr. Joseph Lister, who, if you've ever used Listerine, you've probably heard of. Well, documents dating further back to about 1833 with the Joseph Smith Doctrine stated, "Strong drinks are not for the belly, but for the washing of the body." This belief was put to the test by many of the physicians who believed in the benefits of alcohol in the body, such as George Teichner. Dr. George Teichner, in 1863, was wounded during a skirmish and found his colleagues recommending an amputation. Teichner was a fervent believer in that the burn of alcohol was cleansing, and he proceeded to treat his own wounds while administering a solution of spirits to his very own leg wound. This gentleman right here performed surgery on himself and poured strong liquor into his own wounds, believing that the burn of alcohol was purifying. Teichner not only fought through the injury, but he managed to heal his own wounds in such a way that he regained full use of his leg. And this was to buck the tradition of the time, where the Union Manual of Surgery literally would state, if the limb has been condemned, do not hesitate to excise. If you believe that there's infection setting in, cut it off, don't waste time. Just imagine how badly that would burn. Feeling that alcohol intensity in a leg wound, and the amount of courage and fortitude it would take Teichner to be able to do that. Do you think that you'd be able to perform surgery on yourself? Teichner was far from the only surgeon to make use of alcohol to heal his men's wounds, and many physicians, northern and southern alike, used the calming effects of alcohol to soothe anxieties in the soldiers in their care. Many of them prescribed alcohol to treat a condition that they referred to as delirium tremens. Now, today we know delirium tremens as ethanol withdrawal. It's withdrawal from an excess of alcohol. But at the time, they were just using those symptoms as an excuse to be able to prescribe this alcohol to ease their men's suffering. The surgeons themselves weren't immune to the stresses either, and one war correspondent from Virginia stated that many of these surgeons feel it's their solemn duty that any time they administer brandy to a patient that they should drink themselves. Their jobs are performed with great unction and conscientiousness, however. On the other side of the coin, and a much darker take, a Union medical director by the name of Stout described a surgeon in his care who had to be replaced as having a mind so befogged with liquor, but never known to be drunk. While this was happening, the soldiers outside of the medical tents, they continued to imbibe as well. Many generals felt that alcohol served as a stimulant to combat the effects of exposure and fatigue on their men. For the soldiers, drink came very often and frequently was actually safer than the opportunities that they had to drink water, whether that was from unclean wells or rivers. One man, he would write to his lover, "Molly, tell your pa that if I had his brandy out here, I could sell it for $40 a gallon." Spirits were very highly regulated by quartermasters, but beer was prevalent. There were many foragers who would actually gather supplies from their long marches and do something akin to home brewing on the campaign. In other cases, especially up in the Union, entire rations of beer would be given to their soldiers in order to try to keep morale high. But put yourself in their shoes for a moment. Exhausted from marching miles and miles a day, far from home, not sure when the next fighting would be. Surely you'd want to partake in some comforts of home too, right? Now, the American Civil War served as a trial for our nation in many ways. Although it was slightly too soon for the scientific understanding to confirm the antiseptic properties of alcohol, a combination of belief and practical application meant that the distilleries of America played a very prominent role in saving soldiers' well-beings, both physical and spiritual. So take a look at your drink and consider, would it bring you comfort in these trying times? If you feel that you've learned something new about the drinks that you commonly partake in, then raise a glass. Glad to see it. And enjoy, as they certainly would have, in order to get by in the most trying of times. To reiterate, alcohol, of course, played a very prominent role in the American Civil War in helping to tend to both the physical and spiritual needs of the soldiers. It took a substantial amount of labor to be able to support the necessary amount of alcohol to take care of both of these armies. That it played a role in a medical setting, helping to preserve the lives of the enlisted men and officers alike partook in the consuming of alcohol, helping to use its effects to mitigate the pains of war. Hopefully, you've learned more about the stories of alcohol's role in the war, and that you'll remember these stories. And next time you have a drink, raise a glass and remember that many of these drinks have ties to conflict. I'll be present after the presentation and happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I appreciate your visitation and taking the time to listen and participate as I spoke with this program. Take your time, enjoy your drinks, and thank you for coming. Have a great evening.